upon impact. There were no skid marks, no signs of braking, just a violent, high-speed punctuation mark on a life that had been lived at full throttle since the very beginning. Television coverage at the time focused on the wreckage, showing a mangled frame that was almost unrecognizable as a professional athlete's prized possession. The shock rippled through the league because just weeks earlier, this man had been putting up some of the most electric numbers in the NBA. People started asking how a 25-year-old in the absolute prime of his career ends up on a lonely Ohio highway in the middle of the night. To understand that impact, you have to look back at the momentum he built long before he ever sat behind the wheel of that Mercedes. Before the headlines were about wreckage and tragedy, they were about a young man from Flint who could score from the parking lot. Terry Furlow didn't just play basketball. He attacked it with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, a trait that earned him a legendary status in the high-stakes world of the Big Ten. If you followed Michigan State basketball in the mid-70s, you knew exactly who the cat was. Terry Furlow earned that nickname because of his quickness, his predatory instincts on the court, and a silky smooth jumper that seemed to defy the physics of the era. He was the kind of player who didn't need a screen to get open. He just needed an inch of daylight and the audacity to take the shot. During the 1975 to 1976 season, according to Basketball Archives, Furlow was the undisputed king of the conference, leading the Big Ten in scoring with an average of 29.4 points per game. He wasn't just a volume shooter, he was a precision instrument who made the opposition look like they were playing in slow motion. The peak of his collegiate powers came on a cold night in early January. University records show that on January 5th, 1976, Furlow put on a clinic against Iowa, dropping 50 points in a single game, a school record that stood as a testament to his sheer offensive brilliance. Reporters noted at the time that he played with a chip on his shoulder the size of a Great Lake, often chirping at defenders and even his own coaching staff if he felt the ball wasn't moving his way fast enough. It was that specific brand of confidence that made him a hero in East Lansing, but a question mark for professional scouts. They saw the talent, but they also saw a man who wasn't used to being told no or being asked to share the spotlight. The scouts weren't just looking at the 50-point games. They were looking at the temperament behind them. One version of the story suggests that Terry believed he was the best player in the country, and he wasn't shy about saying so. As the draft approached, the buzz around him was deafening, but so were the whispers about his refusal to conform to traditional team hierarchies. He was heading to the big leagues with a scoring average that suggested he was a savior, but he was about to join a locker room in Philadelphia that already had its gods. Entering the NBA is a reality check for every rookie, but for Terry Furlow, it was a collision with a brick wall. In the 1976 NBA draft, the Philadelphia 76ers used the 12th overall pick to bring him into a locker room that was already overflowing with future Hall of Fame talent. According to major sports media reports, Terry walked into a situation where he was expected to sit behind Julius Erving, George McGinnis, and Doug Collins. For a man who had just finished leading the Big Ten in scoring, being a spectator was a foreign and frustrating concept. He wasn't just another rookie, he was a high-octane engine being kept in the garage, and the tension started to show almost immediately. The numbers tell a story of a stalled career. According to Basketball Archives, Furlow appeared in only 32 games during his rookie season, averaging a meager 5.2 points in limited minutes. In interviews, he said something close to this, that he felt he was being treated like a schoolboy rather than the elite scorer he knew himself to be. This wasn't just a matter of playing time, it was a clash of identities. The 76ers were trying to build a championship culture around established stars, and Terry's vocal frustration reportedly began to grate on the veterans. He wasn't the cat in Philly, he was just another name on the depth chart, and his patience was wearing thin. Reporters covering the team began to hear murmurs of locker room discontent, with some claiming that Terry's attitude was becoming a distraction for a team with title aspirations. The front office had a decision to make. Do they wait for their lottery pick to mature and accept a role, or do they cut their losses before the friction turns into a fire? The answer came in the fall of 1977, when the 76ers decided they had seen enough of the disgruntled rookie. They picked up the phone and made a deal that sent him back to the state of Ohio, where he would join a Cleveland Cavaliers roster that promised him the one thing Philadelphia wouldn't: the green light. Moving from a championship contender in Philadelphia to a rebuilding squad in Cleveland felt like a breath of fresh air for Terry, at least on the surface. In October 1977, the Cavaliers sent a 1981 first-round draft pick to the 76ers to acquire Furlow, according to sports media reports. For the Cleveland front office, it was a high-priced gamble on a young man with an untapped ceiling. For Terry, it was a chance to finally step out of the shadows of giants and prove that the cat could still hunt in the professional ranks. He wasn't just joining a team, he was joining a rotation that desperately needed a spark off the bench, and he provided it with a scoring punch that few second stringers in the league could match. The production on the court initially seemed to justify the trade. According to Basketball Archives, during the 1977 to 1978 season, Terry's scoring average jumped to 11.0 points per game, nearly doubling the output from his rookie year. He became a favorite of the fans at the Richfield Coliseum, often coming into the game and scoring 8 or 10 points in a frantic 5-minute burst. But while the scoreboard liked what Terry was doing, the man holding the clipboard had a different perspective. Reporters noted at the time that head coach Bill Fitch, a notorious disciplinarian, was growing increasingly weary of Terry's defensive lapses and his tendency to ignore the structured offense in favor of hero ball. The tension between the coach's rigid system and the player's improvisational style began to leak into the local papers. Fitch wanted a soldier. Terry wanted to be the general. As the season wore on, the conversations in the Cleveland locker room reportedly shifted from basketball strategy to Terry's inability to follow the program. By the time the summer of 1978 rolled around, the excitement of the trade had soured into a cold war of wills. The points were there, but the trust was gone, and as Terry headed into his third professional season, the murmurs about his attitude were no longer just a Philadelphia story. In the world of professional sports, once a label sticks, it is incredibly hard to peel off. By the 1978 to 1979 season, Terry Furlow was being whispered about as the league's enfant terrible, a talent so great that it was overshadowed by a personality that many coaches found unmanageable. This wasn't just about missed shots. It was about the culture Terry brought with him. According to sports media interviews from the era, Terry was involved in several heated verbal altercations with the coaching staff that led to a noticeable decline in his minutes, despite his continued efficiency when he actually touched the floor. He was a man living on his own island, seemingly indifferent to the growing concern of those around him. The rumors weren't limited to the hardwood. The Cleveland club scene was vibrant in the late 70s, and Terry was reportedly a visible fixture in the nightlife. While he never missed a game, the perception was that he was burning the candle at both ends. Archived sports columns from that period revealed that Terry's camp reportedly floated 2 separate trade requests during his tenure in Cleveland, signaling that he was just as unhappy with the Cavaliers as they were with him. He felt restricted, watched, and unfairly judged by a league that he believed didn't understand his need for freedom. This period of his life was a slow-motion collision between his undeniable professional gift and his personal restlessness. Television reports at the time often characterized him as a nomad, a basketball mercenary who couldn't stay in one place long enough to unpack his bags. The tragedy of this reputation was that it masked the very real struggle of a young man trying to find a home in a league that was increasingly suspicious of players who didn't fit the corporate mold. Just as the trade rumors reached a fever pitch, the phone rang with an offer from the South that seemed like a perfect escape, though it would turn out to be anything but. On February 15, 1979, the Cleveland Cavaliers finally ended the stalemate, trading Terry Furlow to the Atlanta Hawks in exchange for Butch Lee and a 1982 draft pick, according to public documents. To many observers, this move felt like a demotion, sending a high-volume scorer to a Hawks team that prided itself on defense and grit. Terry arrived in Georgia with the weight of his reputation trailing behind him like a shadow. He was joining a team led by the intense and uncompromising Hubie Brown, a man whose coaching philosophy was the antithesis of everything Terry Furlow represented. If Terry thought he had it hard in Cleveland, he was about to face a masterclass in discipline. The transition was jarring and, for Terry, deeply discouraging. According to Basketball Archives, he appeared in only 29 games for the Hawks over parts of 2 seasons. Under Brown's watchful eye, every dribble and every shot was scrutinized. There was no room for the reckless speed that had made Terry a legend in the Big Ten. In public material from the time, it was clear that Terry felt like a rented hand rather than a core member of the team. He was averaging decent numbers in his limited time, but the joy was gone. He looked like a man playing for a paycheck rather than a player chasing a legacy. The conflict in Atlanta wasn't just about basketball sets. It was about a young man feeling the walls close in on his career before he had even reached his 25th birthday. He was being traded or benched every time he started to feel comfortable, and the nomadic lifestyle was clearly taking a toll on his focus. The Hawks organization was aiming for the playoffs, and they decided that Terry's high-risk, high-reward style didn't fit their postseason blueprint. By the end of 1979, the Atlanta experiment was over, and Terry was packed into a deal that sent him to the Salt Lake Valley, a place that many in the league considered the Siberia of the NBA. When Terry Furlow arrived in Utah late in 1979, he found himself in a place that matched his own sense of isolation. The Jazz had just moved from New Orleans to Salt Lake City, and the franchise was struggling to find its identity in a new, quiet market. For many players, being sent to a struggling expansion-era team was a death knell for their career. But for Terry, it was the first time in years he felt like he could breathe. The Jazz didn't have the luxury of a deep bench or a rigid system that stifled individual brilliance. They needed points, and they needed them badly. For the first time since his days at Michigan State, Terry was looked at not as a problem to be solved, but as a solution to a scoring drought. The transformation was immediate and undeniable. According to Basketball Archives, during that 1979 to 1980 season, Furlow's production skyrocketed as he finally received the minutes his talent demanded. He averaged a career-high 16.0 points per game, but the real story was in the workload. Official league records show his playing time jumped to an average of 31.2 minutes per game, a massive increase from the 15.6 minutes he was allotted during his rookie year in Philadelphia. He formed a lethal, if undersized, scoring duo with Adrian Dantley, and for a few months it seemed the Cat had finally found a pride that would let him lead. Reporters noted at the time that the narrative around Terry was shifting. The troublemaker label was being replaced by talk of an underrated star who just needed the right environment to flourish. In television reports from the Salt Lake City area, fans were beginning to embrace his flashy style and his ability to pull up for a jumper from anywhere on the floor. He looked happy, he looked settled, and he looked like a man who was finally ready to cash in on the immense promise he had shown 4 years earlier. But even in this period of professional rebirth, there was a sense that Terry was playing with a desperate urgency, as if he knew he had to make every second count before the clock ran out. That urgency reached a boiling point in early February when he stepped onto the court against the Denver Nuggets. On the night of February 8, 1980, the basketball world saw a version of Terry Furlow that few believed existed outside of a college gym. The Jazz were facing off against the Denver Nuggets, and from the opening tip, it was clear that Terry was in a different dimension. He wasn't just hitting shots. He was manipulating the game, finding angles that shouldn't have existed and scoring with a variety that left the Denver defense in shambles. It was the kind of performance that reminded everyone why he had been a first-round pick. According to official box scores, Furlow finished the night with 52 points, a career high that remains one of the most prolific scoring outputs in the history of the Jazz organization. The efficiency of the night was just as staggering as the total. Basketball archives record that he shot 19 of 32 from the field, a display of sharpshooting that seemed almost effortless. In interviews after the game, teammates described a locker room atmosphere that was electric, with a feeling that Terry had finally arrived as an elite NBA talent. He played with a joy and a swagger that had been missing during his stints in Cleveland and Atlanta. Documentary footage from the era shows a young man who finally felt like he belonged at the top of the mountain, shaking off the bust labels and the critics who said he couldn't carry a team. However, the high of that 52-point night wasn't just about basketball. In the press coverage following the game, some observers noted that Terry's intensity seemed almost too high, a frenetic energy that suggested something was churning beneath the surface. He had reached the pinnacle of his professional life, but the spotlight also cast a long shadow. As the 1980 season wound down, the adulation of the fans in Utah couldn't completely mask the fact that the NBA in the late 70s was a league struggling with its own internal demons. Terry was becoming a star, just as the culture he was immersed in was starting to fracture under the weight of its own excesses. To understand Terry Furlow's final months, you have to understand the era he was living in, a time when the NBA was often referred to as a party league. The late 70s and early 80s saw a culture of excess that permeated almost every franchise, and the transition from the court to the nightlife was seamless for many young stars. Major sports media retrospectives from that period have reported that approximately 75% of NBA players were using banned substances by the year 1980. This wasn't a secret held in the shadows. It was an open reality that the league at the time had no official policy to combat. Terry was a product of this environment, a young man with money, fame, and a personality that naturally gravitated toward the fast lane. According to league records, the maximum penalty for conduct detrimental to the team was a fine of only $2,500, a drop in the bucket for a professional athlete and a deterrent that did absolutely nothing to stop the growing problem. Reporters covering the league noted at the time that the party lifestyle in cities like Cleveland and Atlanta was almost expected, and Terry, always the cat looking for the next thrill, reportedly found himself deep within that circle. There were whispers among those close to him that he was struggling with a destructive dependency, even as he was putting up the best numbers of his career. One version of the story suggests that Terry was aware he was spiraling and had even made quiet inquiries about seeking help, but the structure wasn't there to support him. The league's lack of a formal drug anti-abuse program meant that players were often left to police themselves, and for a 25-year-old living at reckless speed, self-policing was a losing battle. As the 1980 season came to a close, Terry decided to head back to Ohio for a weekend of relaxation and old friends. He was a man standing at a crossroads, unaware that the path he was choosing for the weekend would lead him directly to a concrete pillar on Interstate 71. By late May, the NBA season had wound down, and Terry Furlow found himself back in the familiar territory of Northeast Ohio. For Terry, Cleveland wasn't just a place where he had played. It was a city where he felt seen, even if the relationship with the front office had been complicated. He spent those final days moving through his old social circles, appearing to many as a man who had finally weathered the storm of his early career. According to television reports, on the night of May 22, 1980, Terry was seen at a popular Cleveland nightclub, reportedly in high spirits and celebrating the success of his recent season in Utah. Friends and acquaintances described him as upbeat, yet there was that same underlying restlessness that had defined his cat persona since his days in East Lansing. The timeline of that early morning remains a subject of intense scrutiny for those trying to piece together the tragedy. Police witness statements gathered in the aftermath suggest that Terry left his last known location at approximately 3 in the morning to begin the drive toward his home. The night was clear, and the interstate was largely empty, providing the kind of open road that often tempted a man known for his love of high-performance vehicles. In interviews with people who saw him that night, there was no immediate indication that the drive would be any different from the hundreds of other late-night trips he had made during his time in the league. However, as the silver Mercedes moved through the quiet of the Ohio night, the internal and external pressures of Terry's life were converging. The transition from the high-energy environment of the club to the isolation of the highway created a dangerous vacuum. As some reports claimed, the speed of the car began to climb well past the legal limit, reflecting a life that had always struggled to find a middle gear. As the silver Mercedes merged onto the highway, Terry wasn't just fighting the clock, he was moving toward a moment that would forever change the way the league looked at its brightest stars. In the immediate wake of the collision, the public narrative was one of a tragic, high-speed accident involving a young athlete in his prime. But as the weeks passed, a deeper, more troubling story began to emerge from the clinical silence of the lab. According to court and public records, the month of June 1980 brought the release of the official toxicology results, and the findings sent a shockwave through the basketball community. The Cuyahoga County coroner's report revealed that Terry had been operating his vehicle with a potent combination of banned substances and diazepam in his system. This wasn't just a case of a driver falling asleep at the wheel. It was a documented glimpse into the destructive dependency that had been simmering beneath his professional success. The medical explanation offered a grim context for the reckless speed reported by the police. Medical experts noted at the time that the interaction between a powerful stimulant and a tranquilizer can create a false sense of invincibility and severely impair judgment. This chemical cocktail likely explained why there were no skid marks at the scene. Terry may not have even realized the danger before the impact occurred. In the Utah Jazz front office and among his former teammates in Philadelphia and Cleveland, the news was met with a mixture of grief and a painful realization. The Cat had been running from more than just defenders. He had been navigating a personal crisis that the League of the 1970s was ill-equipped to handle. The revelation of the toxicology report stripped away the veneer of the party league era and forced a conversation that many in the NBA had been avoiding. This wasn't just about one man's choices. It was about a culture where the signs of a severe personal crisis were often overlooked as long as the player could still produce on the hardwood. Terry's situation became the terrifying prologue to a decade that would shake the NBA to its core, as the league realized that the talent on the court was only as stable as the lives being lived off of it. Terry Furlow was only 25 years old when his journey ended on that Ohio interstate, leaving behind a legacy that is equal parts brilliant and cautionary. To this day, fans at Michigan State and in Salt Lake City talk about the what-if factor, the heights he might have reached if he had been able to maintain the trajectory he started during that 52-point night in February. According to university archives, his presence is still felt in East Lansing, where his number 15 jersey and his induction into the Hall of Fame serve as reminders of a time when he was the most dangerous scorer in the college game. But in the broader history of the NBA, His passing served a much darker, more administrative purpose. The loss of such a vibrant talent was a primary catalyst for change within the professional ranks. According to league documents, the landmark agreement reached in 1983 between the NBA and the Players Association regarding a drug anti-abuse program was a direct response to the string of tragedies that Terry's accident helped bring to light. The league finally moved away from the hands-off approach of the 70s, implementing the first comprehensive policy to